Hello, and welcome to Greenlee Art Space. My name is Kimberly Hawking, and I'm the director and curator here. Greenlee Art Space is a nonprofit art organization dedicated to enriching lives and cultivating community through art. We're so excited to have you join us for our Native American storytelling panel. So with programs like this, we have many different people that we need to thank. And we'd like to thank ACTA, the Alliance for California Traditional Arts, for their Living Cultures grant, which has made this panel discussion, as well as the other ones that we've done, possible. We're so grateful for your support. We also would like to thank the California Arts Council for their ongoing support of Greenlee Art Space, and also our individual donors and patrons. We so appreciate all of your support. So if you would like to support us, go ahead and go to greenleeartspace.org and you can make a donation there. All right, so for our program today, you're going to hear a short introduction from each of our 4 storytellers. They're going to tell you a little bit about their heritage and history and how they got into storytelling, which is really intriguing because they have many different ways of going about storytelling. Kat High of Neshkanooka, a local Native American Artists Collective, will be leading the panel discussion and will be one of the panelists. So we're so grateful that you're here to join us today. Without further ado, here are our panelists.
Haku, Hamanatan, Nutawan Dennis Garcia, Pasekba Nukachin. I said hello in Chumash and hello to everyone in my Fernandino Tataviam language. And I said, I'm Dennis Garcia and I'm from the San Fernando Valley. I am considered an elder since I'm at a certain age. I think that the main thing that started is finding out who I was many, many years ago, because I didn't grow up in the culture. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, and because of probably discrimination and things to my grandmother and my parents, I wasn't exposed to the culture. So, but my grandmother, who is very important in my life, always told me, says, we're of mixed blood, but we are Native people. Our people have been here for a long, long time. So don't anybody ever tell you that you're not a Native person, because we are. So I could say my Chumash culture and comes from like Ventura area and stuff like that. But my Fernandino Tataviam, they say my main village that we came from was Tahunga, and that we were one of the 3 main lineages in that Tataviam culture here in the San Fernando, Santa Clarita, and Antelope valleys. So, but that's how I started. And once I got late into my adulthood, I started to look to see who I was, because my grandmother gave me that identity, because there was always a question of, who I was and where I was raised. So I went looking after things happened in my life, things changed, and I started looking to different elders and a mentor in my cousin, Charlie Cook. And he exposed me to people, introduced me to people that were, majorly involved in the culture. And I was accepted right away. It was unbelievable that a lot of people that have lived the culture haven't been able to do the things that I've done in my life, because I don't know, maybe it was because there weren't a lot of us out there living our culture, talking about our culture, learning stories, learning how to dance, because I am also a traditional dancer in the Chumash culture. So those are the things that have started me on my journey, besides my grandmother letting me know who I really, really was, because it was hard for me to understand when growing up in the San Fernando Valley that a brown person would come up to me and they would say, and they would speak Spanish to me, and I go, they would actually get angry because I didn't understand what they were saying. And I go, well, I don't know what to tell you, because I was born and raised here and I've never spoke Spanish, and our languages were basically taken away from us. So those are the main things that would kind of drove me in that direction, to find out who I was and if I should be involved in my culture. So with that, I because my mom and my grandmother were main influences in my life, and we are matriarchal, our cultures. Those are the things that when I think about, even though I was influenced by a lot of male people, that our mothers always taught us what was right and what was wrong. They always nurtured us when we were, down, and they always healed us when we were sick, and fed us, when we were hungry. And they also would tell us to be respectful of everyone around us, because my mom, who is a strict woman, but she was also very loving. She always wanted to represent ourselves well when we went out into public, that we wouldn't embarrass our families or do something to for them to look on us, in a not good light. So, because when we were little, we got in trouble, and we didn't get beat. We got a smack when we needed to get smacked and stuff like that. So, but, like I say, but up until the time I was 8 or 10, whenever I went out to play, she would always um, call me back and say, "I need a hug and a kiss before you go out." So that's what I mean by, her being strict, but yet very loving. And I kind of make light of it when I say she would kind of like hug you with this one and smack you with this one. But that was my mom, and that was my grandmother. They were always wanted us to be respectful, teach us our manners. So I guess the story starts there, is with learning about things like that and being respectful of other people and what the things that they do in their life. So I hope I've learned that in my life. I hope that, I'm humble, when it's time to be humble, and proud when it's time to be proud. So yeah, we compare our women to the willow tree, and the willow tree grows by the waterways and it absorbs a lot of water. And we made our homes called ups, the Chumash homes, out of that willow, the framework of that structure. And they would sink it in the ground a little bit, and they would bend it together and bring it to a dome shape and tie it. And then they would also take more branches and put rings around it, is depending on how tall it was, rings around, and then they would thatch it with a tule that grew near the waterways. So they were kind of like shingles. They would start at the bottom and then overlap them and stuff like that. So we compare our women to the willow tree, which was made a strong structure. We compared it. Our women are strong. They bend, but they wouldn't break. So with that, I usually sing a song of the willow, honoring our women who are strong, who are the ones that teaches our lessons and how to act right in public. So I would like to sing a song of the willow in honor of my mother and my grandmother and all of our life givers, all of our women, all of our relations, whether they be an aunt or a sister, or someone like that. So I'd like to sing this song right now. Hene ya hone. Hene ya hone. Hene ya hone. Hone. Shalu, shalu, hoya, hoya. Shalu, shalu, hoya, hoya. Hene ya hone. Hene ya hone. Hene ya hone. Hone. Shalu, shalu, hoya, hoya. Shalu, shalu, hoya, hoya. Hene ya hone. Hene ya hone. Hene ya hone. Hone. Shalu, shalu, hoya, hoya. Shalu, shalu, hoya, hoya. Hene ya hone. Hene ya hone. Hene ya hone. Hone. Shalu, shalu, hoya, hoya. Shalu, shalu, hoya, hoya. Hene ya hone. Hene ya hone. Oh, ma hone. So like I say, that's probably my grandmother was a big influence, and I thank her for realizing my identity and that I had a culture to look forward to and to seek out. And with that came the desire to meet many, many other people that sent me on my journey to learn stories, to sing songs, to learn how to dance and represent my culture in the way that I do today. And I consider that an honor because when someone asks you to do this and come do something for them, it, they think enough of you. And Kat has been one of those people in my life that has always promoted me and tell me I should be out here doing these things to represent my culture. So Kat is one of the many people that I thank for that. So I thank you for the honor of being here today. Aho.
This is Valina Broussard-Dismukes. I'm a photographer, former educator, and I guess I still am an educator. I do my storytelling through photographs with some narratives as well from time to time. I was born in St. Louis, Missouri. At that time, it was quite segregated, and we had a good life regardless of those issues there. I moved out to Los Angeles in 1960 to seek my fortune and got a job with the Los Angeles Unified School District. During that time, I also met family members who had some information about our triracial background. And so in family gatherings, they would talk about relatives in the 1850s and a possible link to the Choctaw Reservation, the Choctaw Nation rather. And so that was interesting to me. And being in Southern California with the richness of cultures here, I said, my goodness, I should explore that. So in 1970, I received a camera. And with that camera, I began to take lessons at Inner City Cultural Center and LA Trade Tech, and explored the neighborhood, explored photographs of my family, and began to go to powwows to see how people who looked like me were celebrating their Native American ancestry. Over time, I took photographs of 100 people and collected their stories just because I was interested in what that experience was. Eventually, I mounted an exhibit at the William Grant Still Art Center, and it was such a huge success. People were turned away. They could not accommodate the number of people that came that were interested in this topic. It was overflowing. Eventually, that exhibit traveled to various venues around the country, and someone at the exhibit had said, you know, you should do a book. And so several years later, I did a book. And then several years later, someone requested to have some of those images depicted in an introduction to a film called Black Indians, an American Story. So that was a wonderful exploration and opening into the community. One of the people at that exhibit was Kat High. And if everyone knows Kat, they knows her powers of persuasion. So she was the one who said, you should do a book. And she invited me into the community, into Haramakna Cultural Center, and she became a good friend and a mentor and a guide into the community. So from that, I became a member of their art group, the Neskanukit, and currently I'm on the board of an Afro-Amerindian Cultural Resource Center, and we are exploring ways that we can keep people informed about this intersection. And when I first started this project in 1995, there was very little information online about African Native American connections. Information has exploded, not only with people's interest in it, but the media has finally said, yes, this is a story that we need to begin to tell. And so there are conferences that are being held, there are powwows that are being conducted throughout the country that celebrates that connection of African American, Native American peoples as well. One of the, I guess, most prominent figures from my Red Black Connection, the book and the series of photographs, has been that of Bo Glasschild, who is um, is his use of symbols from the Native American culture and from African American culture as well. And he makes a strong presentation for the reality that these two cultures have come together in the past and will continue to come together. And so his image has been used in newspaper articles and books and continues to be very powerful. And you'll see it if you come to the exhibit. The other thing that I started trying was some photo illustrations. I decided to take some images of Native American people and reproduce them in multiples on an image that would look like a rug. And so at first glance, you would say, oh, that's nice colors there. That might be an interesting picture of a rug. But if you look deeper, you can see the Indian figures there. And so as I began to look back at this particular project, I came to realize that what I was really talking about is the Indian artisans who have created rugs, who often are dismissed. Their artwork is celebrated, but they as people are not. And so that's the name of the Hidden Figures for that series of 6 photographs and photo illustrations that I've done. One of my great passions with the camera is traveling, and I've been fortunate enough to go to more than 60 countries. And during that period of time, I, as much as I can, seek out who the indigenous people are in those cultures. And from Finland and the Sami to a population in Taiwan, to New Zealand, of course, with the Maoris, to Mexico with the Tarahumaras. It has been such a joy to be able to meet people and photograph and get a little bit of knowledge about what their cultural parameters are. Excuse me. Currently, I'm exploring sculpture and basket weaving, again with Kat giving me some direction, and designing quilts. And just recently I did a quilt that looked at the violence in the United States since its inception, from Indian wars for the Civil War, to the Indian wars, to the American Revolution, lynchings, strikes, civil strikes. So that's been an interesting part. My most recent one it's still in the process, is using Native American symbols in a quilt format. So I'm exploring different ways of expressing culture, and what I do is an attempt for me to gain knowledge for myself, and then I can share it with other people. And one of the things I've done during this terrible pandemic time is I have explored hand coloring ethnic designs. So that's, it's not as mindless as it seems, but it's a great pleasure to be able to relax and just make some choices about the colors that I want to use and the kind of palette that I want to share with others. And so I've made 100 such cards, so while watching bad television, so what can I say? Anyway, so it's a journey, and I'm waiting for next year, which is the year of the tiger. That should be my year, to really get back into the swing of things. Thank you for listening.
So my name is Camila de los Santos Speed. I am Chickasaw and Choctaw by descent, and I am a Chickasaw tribal citizen. I didn't actually grow up in Oklahoma, but I visited a lot, and I learned about my culture mostly through my mom. So since I was very young, I was just kind of inspired by films and filmmaking in general. My parents were always really, really busy working, so a lot of my time was spent watching films. And my parents saw how much I loved movies and supported me when I decided I wanted to act. I would always put on little plays when I was a kid, and even take part in, school plays, stuff like that, since I was about 3 years old. And then when I was 11, I decided to audition for an acting school. And I took classes twice a week for about 3 years until I kind of graduated from that and was able to get an agent and go out for parts and stuff like that, which I did until I was about 18. When I turned 18, I kind of started to shift my focus to, pursuing, a major in college, which, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I went in undeclared to UCLA and I took a variety of different classes, just everything that you could imagine. And I really wasn't as passionate about anything, other than films. And so I decided to apply to the film school at UCLA, which was daunting because they were only accepting 3 change of majors that year. So that was scary, but I took it as, if I got in, it's kind of fate. That's what I'm supposed to do, is go into filmmaking. And luckily I got in and I was able to kind of hone my storytelling skills. I'd never really written stories prior to that, so it was a learning experience, and UCLA provided a lot of, the materials that I needed to write stories, to make movies, and I was able to make a couple films at my time at UCLA, which helped me realize that what I wanted to get into was directing.
I
right,
like
great.
the Office one.
You like the Trouble in the Office?
Trouble in the Office.
That's
yeah.
my first film I ever made. Yeah. The Art of Native Dance, that was my second film that I ever made. And it was, brought up as an assignment. It was a process film. So basically, you're just making a film about someone doing some sort of process, like cheating on a test or listening to music, going on a date. And I just kind of took that opportunity. I thought it was kind of the perfect opportunity to try to incorporate Native culture, because before then I had kind of just been doing horror and nothing really related to Native culture. And I thought that was kind of a good opportunity. I had somebody who knew how to do fancy dance, and the way that I come up with films is I kind of think of shots in my head. And I had such a clear vision for that one. I needed it to, be really vibrant and fun and lots of movement. And I'm really happy with the way that it turned out. I think that a lot of people really connect to it, and that was kind of the goal. So yeah, that's kind of how it all came together. I want to be the one to tell the stories. And I've always been fascinated by, the fact that films really impact people, and they can be a form of escapism, and they can, you watch a film and maybe you have a stance on one thing, and maybe it changes your mind, or you watch a film and, maybe it inspires you to make some sort of change. And so that's kind of how I got into it. And now I just want to keep making films and hopefully inspire more Native people to, get into filmmaking, because I think that we need a lot more Native filmmakers right now, specifically.
Okay, Aka, I'm Kat High. I live in Topanga, California, which is traditional homeland to the Gabrielino Tongva, as well as the Chumash. It's kind of an intersection of two tribes with the same environment, who took care of the land for like 10,000 years. And I started off with the California Indian Storytelling Association many years ago as a videographer. And I was always behind the camera at the storytelling events. And then one day I raised my hand and said, wait, hello, I'm back here and I have a story to tell. and they grudgingly let me come up and tell a story. And they haven't been able to shut me up much since. but I would love to share a story that is a contemporary Indian story from Topanga. And do you want me to tell it now or not? Now? Yes. Oh, I usually move around when I'm telling stories. So a long time ago, and it was a long, long time ago when I moved to Topanga, it was 42 years ago, I had a king-sized heated waterbed. It was warm. It was a big heating pad, a hot water bottle, and the fur friends sure loved to get up on it with me. So one night in Topanga, about February, I think it was the worst thunder and lightning storm we've seen. Thunder and lightning, one on top of the other. And my dog Joey got scared and jumped up onto the waterbed, and his claw caught a corner. Geyser shot up into the air. I'm trying to stuff bedding into the waterbed to stop it, and water was spilling out of the green shag carpet. Then I got a great idea. I have an idea. I'm going to run outside. I'm going to grab a hose. I'm going to stick it in the bedroom window. I'm going to run back around and take that hose and stick it into the waterbed. And I'm going to run back around and I'm going to start a siphon. And I'm going to suck that water out into the environment instead of flooding my green shag carpet. So I start to run outside barefoot right into the middle of the biggest snail convention that has ever been seen in Topanga. Oh my God, crunch, crunch, slide all the way around to the hose, stuck it in the window, back through the convention and sliding and sliming all the way back, stick it into the waterbed, back out again, through everything and the carnage. And then I had to start a siphon. And how many have ever tried to start a siphon? What do you got to do? Ooh, suck on a hose, yes. And do you have to have that hose down lower than the windowsill? Yes. So I had to lie down on the ground amidst the convention and suck on a hose. Oh, slime. Oh, so I came home back into the house, had to take a hot shower, got back in the living room and slept on the couch. In the morning, I went outside, and Indian tradition is you gotta pray for those that have been killed. So I took my tobacco and I went outside to the snails who were all slimy and everything, and sprinkled tobacco and to say a prayer. And you know what happens when you hit snail mucus with nicotine? They foam up, they slime up. But I want you to know that to this day, I have not had any snails in my yard. 42 years. They got the word. And that's the story. Thank you so much, everybody. I loved hearing your background stories, and I'd love it if you would share one of the stories that you and Ted tell together.
Good. This is my brother's favorite story. It's a story about a Muhu the owl and Hoos the bear. Well, a long, long time ago, when all the creatures were made, Muhu the owl was the most beautiful bird of all. He had silky feathers from the top of his head all the way down to his tail. He had beautiful almond-shaped eyes. He had a proud, regal beak that stuck out from his face. And he also sang beautiful, beautiful songs. Well, Muhu, was kind of full of himself. He liked a lot of compliments, and people pay attention to him. So he knew where all the traffic was going to come through that day. He went to the crossroads and he sat in a tree. And he started to sing his beautiful songs. Well, up comes Squirrel. He puts his little paw to his ear because he hears something. And he looks up in that tree at the crossroads. He says, "Oh, Muhu." Oh, he says, "Look at you. Look how beautiful you are. Oh, those silky feathers. Oh, and that voice. Oh, your songs are so beautiful, so beautiful." Well, Muhu, being full of himself, he would just kind of lean over that branch and go, I know, I know. So, well, Squirrel heard enough, and he'd go on his way. And then here'd come Rabbit. And the same thing would happen. All of a sudden, he'd get close to that tree, and he'd put his little paw to his ear, and he goes, and he'd look up and he says, "Oh, Muhu, that's you. Oh, your songs are so amazing, so beautiful, so melodic. Oh, and look at those. Look at those eyes, and look at that proud, noble beak sticking out of your face. Oh, my goodness. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful." And Muhu would just look down from his branch again and say, I know, I know, I know. Well, this happened throughout the day. All the animals coming by complimenting Muhu on his beauty and his songs. And he would just lean over his branch and say the same thing over and over again. I know, I know. Well, a little while later, here comes Muhu, Hoos the bear. And he's kind of lumbering along, and he's kind of old, and he's a little flea bitten. He doesn't hear as well as he used to, and he doesn't see as well as he used to. But as he gets close to that tree, he starts hearing these songs. And he looks up and he goes, "Oh, Muhu, is that you?" Oh, he says, oh, as I got closer, I could hear you much better. He says, "Oh, your songs are so beautiful, so beautiful." He says, "Oh, and look at those almond-shaped eyes. They're like pools of water. They're almost hypnotic. Oh, my goodness. Oh, just beautiful." He says, "Oh, look at that proud, noble, regal beak. Oh, look at that. Oh, I'd love to touch those feathers because they look so soft." And he said, but he wasn't satisfied with just listening to those songs from afar or looking at him from afar. He wanted to feel those feathers on his big bare paw. So he looks up at Muhu, and he says, "Muhu, why don't you come down here and let me admire you up close?" He says, "I would love to feel those feathers on my paw." Well, Muhu, even though he loved the compliments, he looked down at Hoos and he said, "I don't think so, Hoos." He says, "You want to make an owl sandwich out of me, don't you?" Oh, but Hoos said, "Oh, never, never, never. I would never do anything to someone that sounds as beautiful or looks as beautiful as you. Never, ever, ever." He says, "You're just too beautiful to to do any of that stuff to. And Woohoo would go, I know. So back and forth they bantered. Who's telling Woohoo to come down and Woohoo saying, I don't think so. Till eventually Who's wore him down and Woohoo's vanity got the best of him. He said, okay, Woohoo. She started talking to herself. She said, why shouldn't I let him admire me up close and sing in his ear? So she said, okay, Who's, put your big bare paws out. She goes, I'm gonna come down and land on your big bare paws. So she fluttered down and he landed in big old bare paws of Who's. Well, Who started to hug him, and he says, oh, I think that's a little tight. Who's, he says, you're starting to crumble my feathers. He says, oh, I can't help it. You feel so good as I'm hugging you. And then he would stroke his feathers from the top of her head all the way down to her tail. And he says, oh, that's a little bit rough there, don't you think? Who's, he says, oh, but it feels so good. And Who's draws Woohoo a little bit closer. And Woohoo's going, Who's, that's a little bit tight. He says, I'm starting not to be able to breathe. He goes, oh, but I can't help it. He says, I'm looking into your eyes and they're hypnotic. He says, oh, they're amazing. Till finally she said, Who's, please let me go. Please let me go. And he said, okay, but before I do, I want to give you a great big kiss. So he draws her close to him and he goes, "Mwah." And as he hugs and kisses her tight, boom, the feathers on the top of her head start to pop up. Boom, her eyes kind of bug out. And he gives her one last stroke. As he does, he rubs her face and he flattens that beak to her face. So now, if you're out there by those crossroads and try to look up at that tree, you may go a little bit early in the day and you won't see or hear anything. But if you come back maybe a little bit later at dusk, you still may not see her, but you'll hear her. And she's saying, Who's did this to me? And that's the story of Woohoo and Who's. So usually we sing a song about this in honor of one of those animals. We'll sing about poor Woohoo, and it's called Yamaquiri. And it goes like this. Yamaquiri, Yamaquiri, hey Yamaquiri away, hey Yamaquiri, hey Yamaquiri away, hey Yamaquiri away, hey Yamaquiri away, hey Yamaquiri away, hey Yamaquiri away. Yamaquiri, hey Yamaquiri, hey Yamaquiri away, hey Yamaquiri, hey Yamaquiri away, hey Yamaquiri away, hey Yamaquiri away, hey Yamaquiri away, hey Yamaquiri away. Yamaquiri, Yamaquiri, hey Yamaquiri away, hey Yamaquiri. Hey Yamaquiri away, hey Yamaquiri away, hey Yamaquiri away, hey Yamaquiri away, hey Yamaquiri away. Yamaquiri, hey Yamaquiri, hey Yamaquiri away, hey Yamaquiri, hey Yamaquiri away, hey Yamaquiri away, hey Yamaquiri away, hey Yamaquiri away, hey Yamaquiri away. Yamaquiri. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the story.
Thank you so much, Dennis. That's awesome. I love how you incorporate the song that goes with the story. And it's so cool when I hear you and your brothers tell those traditional stories. So I'm going to go to Camilla. Camilla, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Hi.
I love your powwow dancing video, and
Thank you.
and I've seen the Office one, and it's kind of a psychological thriller because that image across from him is what?
Which image?
sitting opposite.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like kind of a mirror image of himself, a kind of a ghost of his past. You know, he's trapped in this office with this kind of, you know, past that he can't escape from. It's kind of what that signifies.
Ay, ay, ay.
Yeah.
That's pretty scary. If I saw that sitting across from me, I'd be worried.
Yeah.
So I know you're interested in horror films.
Mhm.
Every weekend you're finding another. So
Yeah.
what would you do for a Native American horror film?
Well, you know, I don't have a full-fledged idea. Like right now I'm working on a limited series with a Native lead that kind of, it is a horror, like psychological horror thriller type kind of show, which, you know, I don't want to like give it all away, but it's just kind of horrors of her background, basically, that come back to haunt her and follow her, and she kind of has to, you know, with the help of everyone in her life, kind of maneuver everything.
I know in the past it was really difficult to find a film
Mhm.
with a Native American performer, and with even a Native American playing a Native American.
Yeah.
How has that evolved for you?
I mean, I think it's evolved. I think that we're now seeing more Native leads in like what's it called? Reservation Dogs
Reservation
is a big one. Yeah. And I've even seen Native horror. This movie called Blood Quantum is
Wow.
a zombie horror kind of film where there's a disease going around turning everyone into zombies, but natives are immune to it. So I think it's kind of, yeah, exactly. I think it's kind of, you know, getting it, people are getting cast more, Native people are getting cast more, and I think more Native people are in the industry now with cast and crew and everything. So I think it's evolving slowly, but you know, step by step.
Dennis, I know you've been in several films. Were you playing natives or were you playing non-natives? I know you were background, but were you hired as a native?
As both, I've done, you know, both contemporary people, contemporary native, and you know, traditional native. You know, I've been on the set of. I was lucky enough to, even though I didn't end up in the film except for one shot for The Revenant, I got a free trip down to Argentina, which was pretty fun. It was a paid vacation, basically. They started in Canada. I wasn't involved there, but then they looked for natives, I guess, who had passports. And I was one of the lucky ones that called and said, do you have a passport? And, you know, I said, yeah. It says, I talked to this lady for 2 days, and then on a Wednesday and Thursday, and on a Sunday, I was a flight to Argentina. So I, because they wanted total snowpack, we went down to Antarctica. And then I've been on a thing called Rutherford Falls a couple of times, once last season and a few days this season with Michael Gray Eyes, you know, and that's written by Native people and acted by mostly Native people, but they interact, you know, with the main people, white people, also European people. So it's in its second season, and I've been fortunate enough to do that. So it's fun. I meet a lot of nice people from my culture, from other cultures, and I get paid at the same time, so it's pretty fun.
So Valina,
Yes.
you were approached, I guess, by Rich Heap for his Black Indian documentary, or is it a narrative film or a documentary?
It's a documentary, and it's James Earl Jones supplies the narration for that. And so my photographs were used as an introduction to that. It was this probably a series of 20 or 30 of those photographs. And we had encountered each other at a Dartmouth symposium about entitled Eating Out of the Same Pot, which talked about how people of African and Native American ancestry came together. So that was played on PBS. It's still available. It's available at libraries, I believe. It's a wonderful film. The music is wonderful. The photographs are great. And and the story and the information is very revelatory. So that was a chance meeting because I was at the conference originally that we got together and we said, let's do this. So that was exciting.
It's great. I know Dennis has been to Argentina working on a film, and you have a series of little books of your journeys to various places with indigenous peoples. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, what I did was a series on each continent to which I had been, 6 out of the 7, and it primarily focused on the native peoples of that region. And it was a way of my kind of solidifying what that experience was in Latin America, in China, in Australia, New Zealand, Oceania. It has not taken off like wildfire, but it was a way of my taking a look at, and that was from Bhutan, which I loved that country, and they had just begun to open up. And if kids in their culture, if kids start putting on blue jeans, they're taken out of town and they have to walk back to the city as punishment for not wearing their traditional garb. But a very charming country, a beautiful country. So I cherish those moments.
Where can we find these books?
People can contact me. I'll be happy to share those with you. So they come in a series or it can come individually. So I did a series on Africa as well. Africa, Asia, Latin America, Europe, and Oceania. Oh, there was one more I'm missing. But and anyway, there's 6.
North America.
No, thank you.
I remember when you went to Ghana. Tell me a little bit about that experience of standing in the fort that was the departure point for the Africans rounded up to be slaves.
It was a chilling experience. And to tour, it was just one of many forts that were accessible to the ocean, to the sea, so they could take off. And I went with a group of basically white North Americans there, white Americans, and they were very moved to have been in that space. And some people cried because they understood the enormity of this awful, awful experience. And if you go just to the edge of the fort and you look out in the ocean and you see nothing but sea. And I can only imagine how people felt who were taking that trip, destination unknown, circumstances unknown, what that must have been like. And many did not make it for various reasons, as we all know.
Thank you. Camilla, I'd like to go back to you. So what are your goals now as a filmmaker?
Goal is to make more films, make as many as I can, put them out there, to send them to festivals, meet a lot of, people who I might want to work with in the future. Just keep doing the grind.
I know you've kind of mentioned wanting to be a director.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you see as the role of the director in a film?
I think it's the overall vision. It's the tone and getting the story across. Really, with a different director, you know, you can get the same story, but it's done in a completely different way, and it just, you know, audiences react in a different way, and it might make you think one way, make you think another way if another director does it. So they're kind of in charge of the entire message of the film, I would say.
I taught a class to UAII a couple of times called How to Shoot Like an Indian.
Yeah, I love that.
One of the most important things was framing,
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
and Belina, you also, you know, the important concept that you convey to the audience is what's in that frame.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And then the other part is editing.
Yeah, editing.
How do you
That's-
combine those frames to what emotion, what response do you want to get out of an audience? Belina, let me go to you first on that.
I think I want them to see, first of all, the individual, and it's mostly individuals that that I photograph, to focus on them and to notice the attire, the posture, to imagine what that environment might be like and who the people are, and then want to learn more about how they live. And they're all human beings, so they all celebrate. We all do the same thing basically, but maybe in a different way. So I want them to see the human experience through the photographs that I share with people. And everyone's got a story, and they're all very interesting, all very distinct. And I miss traveling to share that experience, I'll tell you.
So Camilla, as a director, what do you expect to do with that framing and that vision that people see?
Well, I think, you know, framing in general is really, really important. There's one film that I'm thinking, 12 Angry Men, where it's all shot in one room, and at the, you know, beginning of the film, all the shots are really wide. You see everybody in the room, and as the movie goes on, the shots get closer and closer and closer to people's faces, and that gives you like the claustrophobic feeling, you know, and it just ups all the stakes in every way. And I think for me, since I, you know, primarily am in the horror genre, I think a lot of my films are centered on vulnerability and feeling that you can't escape. So I want my audience to feel vulnerable, and I would have to do that in shots and editing.
You really did that with the problem in the office.
Yeah, trouble in the office.
Trouble in the office.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I was hoping you'd feel.
We've got a couple more clips of Camilla's if we want to share those.
Oh, would you please share them? Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, all right.
Wow. That's awesome.
That was my thesis film for my senior year.
Oh, cool. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
What's
that
that
was
called?
a 70s horror.
Cool. Dennis, I'm going to go back to you. And I know there's a story that your dad used to
my dad would ask for this story. I don't know. I'm listening to everyone. I'm getting so many, good feelings from it, and the way we interpret ourselves in this contemporary time, and connecting our traditional with the contemporary. But yeah, now if I would be like, say, at Satwewa, where I did a lot of things, or doing a presentation, my dad would ask me for this story, and we called him Pops, and because being respectful of the elders, we would ask, say, Pops, which story would you like to hear? And this is the story that he would want to hear. A long, long time ago, in a place you know as Malibu, we call Humaliwo, where the waves crash loudly. The people of the village awoke from their ops, their homes, at a time of the year when the sun should be shining brightly. But as they awoke, the only light came from the fires in the village. When they left the outside of the village, it was total darkness. Well, they tried to go about their day's chores and, do what they wanted to do. But once they left the village, they couldn't see a thing. They wanted to go down the ocean and fish. They couldn't gather things because they couldn't see their hand in front of their face. So they came back into the village and they sat by the fires till it was time to go to bed. And as they did, they went back into their ops, they slept, they awoke the next morning, and the same thing happened. And they started to get worried and they started to pray. What happened to the sun? They prayed for the sun to come back to them. Well, this went on for 7 days. The elders, even though they can be warm inside their home, their ops, they wanted to sit in the sunlight and warm their bones. They wanted to take walks and exercise. The children were getting restless. They wanted to practice their hunting skills. They wanted to go fish. They wanted to do many, many things. And then some of the food that they gathered was becoming scarce, so they were worried about that. So he said, what are we going to do? They decided, the chiefs of the village, they had different levels of chiefs, ceremonial chiefs, and, like I said, we were matrilineal, so we had women chiefs. So they sat in council and they said, what are we going to do? The sun hasn't come to us for 7 days. Well, they said, and they finally came up with an idea, and they all agreed. Let's get together with a dozen of our best warriors, and we'll send them out and see if they can bring back the sun to the Chumash people. So they agreed, and the warriors hugged and kissed their families goodbye, and he disappeared into the darkness. Well, an 8th day, a 9th day passed, still no sun. No matter how much they prayed, the sun wasn't going to shine. On the morning of the 10th day, out of the darkness comes an elder, a guy like me. And he approaches a village, and with him he has a warrior that stands about this tall. And the people of the village approach him and they ask him, what do you want with us, old man? He said, I brought my warrior to bring back the sun to the Chumash people. Well, they kind of chuckled because this warrior was only this tall. And they asked the man, what makes you think that warrior is going to bring back the sun to the Chumash people when we sent out a dozen of our best warriors days ago? And the sun still hasn't come back to us. He says, I guarantee my warrior will bring back the sun. Well, having nothing to lose, their warriors didn't bring back the sun. They brought the elder into the circle along with his small warrior. And the elder began to sing. Yanni, yanni, ho, yeah, yo, yeah, yanni, yanni, ho, yeah, yo. And the warrior started to dance in the circle. And he started to dance faster. So the elder sang faster. Yanni, yanni, ho, yeah, yo, yeah, yanni, yanni, ho, yeah, yo. Well, the warrior danced even faster yet. Yanni, yanni, ho, yeah, yo, yeah, yanni, yanni, ho, yeah, yo. And as he danced, he spread his arms out like this. And feathers started to cover his arms. Till eventually his whole body was covered in feathers. Well, he danced a couple more times in the circle, and he took flight and he disappeared into the darkness. Well, the 11th day passed, the 12th day, the 13th day. No matter how much they prayed, the sun still wasn't coming up in the sky. On the morning of the 14th day, in hopes of seeing something after they came out of their homes, they looked and they looked, a little bit of light came out of the east over the mountains. And as time passed, pretty soon more light. Till finally the sun was above the mountains in the east. And as they looked close, those 12 warriors that they sent out were walking back over the mountains, back into the village, and they were greeted by their families, very happy to see them, that they returned safely. As they looked in the mountains, over the mountains in the east, they saw the sun. It was kind of moving back and forth across the mountains. It wasn't getting any higher. But when they looked close, they saw the sun was setting on the tail of that warrior that had turned into that bird. Well, eventually, he stopped moving back and forth. He took the sun a little bit higher in the sky and he dropped it in the sky. And he flew back down to the village. The people of the village approached him. They had many, many questions for him. They had, what went on with the sun? What did you do? What happened up there? He said, did you give us any messages? Did he lessons for us to learn? And the warrior just said yes. And he said, well, what did he say? He said, never take anything for granted, because you never know when that sun's going to come up in the sky. And many more questions kept coming at him. He says, well, what else did the sun say? He said, just because someone is small in stature doesn't determine his strength, because his strength comes from within. More and more questions, more and more, until eventually he stopped listening to the questions and he turned around and he showed him this beautiful red tail. He said, where the sun shone on my tail so brightly, he left my tail feathers this beautiful, beautiful red. And then he showed him this black mark across those tail feathers. This is where the sun actually set. He left this black scorch mark across these beautiful red feathers. And that's the day that the red-tailed hawk was created, and he brought the sun back to the Chumash people, Aho. And so, like Kat was saying earlier, we sing a little song that relates to the story. And it's called Tesun Hilik, the red hawk. Tesun Hilik, Haku te halen. Tesun Hilik, Haku te halen. Ataka pa wo chile, a choho wuchu, a choho wuchu. Ayawa yawa ki wanawa, ayawa yawa ki wanawa. Tesun Hilik, Haku te halen. Tesun Hilik, Haku te halen. Ataka pa wo chile, a choho wuchu, a choho wuchu. Ayawa yawa ki wanawa, ayawa yawa ki wanawa. Tesun Hilik, Haku te halen. Tesun Hilik, Haku te halen. Ataka pa wo chile, a choho wuchu, a choho wuchu. Ayawa yawa ki wanawa, ayawa yawa ki wanawa. Tesun Hilik, Haku te halen. Tesun Hilik, Haku te halen. Ataka pa wo chile, a choho wuchu, a choho wuchu. Ayawa yawa ki wanawa, ayawa yawa ki wanawa. Tesun Hilik, Haku te halen. Aho Hilik.
Oh, thank you, Dennis. Thank you. Kimberly, we still have a little time before questions, right?
Yes, we do. You can go ahead. I think you had a story you wanted to tell since you're one of the participants. Would you like to tell one of your stories, Kat?
I think I'm going to finish up with a story. And it's a story from a long time ago, and it's a story for today. So a long time ago, that Coyote was very much into himself. You know, everything he wanted now. So he went to sleep and to take a little nap. And Coyote says, when I wake up, I'm so hungry, I'm going to eat the first thing that I see. So he went to sleep. woke up, looked up, and what did he see but the sky? Coyote says, I'm so hungry, I'm going to eat the sky. So he started sucking it in. And it got darker and darker, and finally he sucked it all into his belly, and it was dark. All the animals and all the people going, hey, what happened? Where's the sky? It's all dark. So they said, we got to do something about this. So this little boy raised his hand. He says, I know what happened to the sky. Coyote ate it. I'm going to climb in, Coyote, and I'm going to bring it back. So the little boy starts to climb into Coyote's mouth. And he gets down there and he tries to tug and pull on the sky, but you know, it's big and wadded up in the belly, and it's really hard to pull. And Rabbit comes along and says, I'll help you. Stick out your hand. So the kid sticks out his hand. Rabbit grabs hold and starts pulling to help him. And he's pulling and pulling, and he's not getting very far. No, so Skunk comes along. Skunk says, hey, I can help. So he grabs hold of the bunny's ear and starts pulling and pulling and pulling, but they're budging it a little bit, but not much. So Deer comes along. Deer comes along and grabs hold of Skunk's tail and going, no spraying, I'm helping. So they pull together, they're pulling and pulling. It's budging a little bit, but not far. So Bear comes along. Bear says, I'm going to grab hold of your haunches, Deer, and I'm going to pull. And Deer is going, and you're not going to taste, right? So they're pulling together. Bear is pulling, Deer is pulling, Skunk is pulling, Rabbit is pulling, and the little boy is pulling. And they pulled that sky right out of Coyote, just like that. Well, then it was flopping around on the ground. Well, that's not going to help too much. So Turkey Vulture comes along and he says, I know, I'll help you guys. I'm going to fly it up back into the air. So Turkey Vulture flies the sky back up there, but one end is kind of drooping down. So Woodpecker comes along and says, I know, I'll help you. I'll tack it up there. I'll tack it up there. And he tacked the sky back up. He says, you better hold it firm so Coyote doesn't try to pull it down again. So that's the story. That's how Coyote ate the sky, but everybody pulled together to get it back in place. So the moral of the story is, don't eat the first thing you see when you wake up. And 2, let's all pull together so that we can take care of the environment and take care of each other. And that's the story. So I think, are we ready to go to questions, Kimberly?
So, Camilla, I'm really interested in what is it that you like so much about horror films, and are there any specific directors or films that kind of inspire you? I guess I'm thinking of we have a little clip maybe we could show of Rewind. I'm thinking of some of the imagery in there. Maybe Dave, you want to show that real quick and then she could answer the question?
Sure.
What the hell is this? Hey, where's Che? I just found this stuff. Is everything okay? Like, where's Che? We're gonna be late for this party thing. We kind of got to get there. Why the fuck are you looking?
Maybe just tell us a little bit about that. I know the clip is just one part of the story, but and just I love sort of the imagery of the person coming in, and it reminds me of some different filmmakers. So yeah, talk a little bit about that.
Well, Rewind was a film that I actually got the idea from a friend who had an experience where he was invited over to a friend's house, and his friend and his friend's girlfriend turned out to be a little weird. And then my friend felt that he was in a dangerous situation. He tried to leave, he couldn't, and I kind of took that idea and made it into Rewind. So I think, I mean, most of the directors that I look up to actually aren't horror, but one horror director that I love, that I wouldn't say I've taken much of his style at all, but Guillermo del Toro is one of my favorites. I really like Alejandro González Iñárritu, and Chloe Zhao is one of my favorites as well. And I mean, I think when I'm, Dario Argento too is one of my favorite. He's a horror, Italian horror filmmaker. But what I really love in films is movement. I really like camera movement. I think that in horror specifically, it's necessary. And that's kind of what I try to incorporate into my films, specifically Rewind too. Coming
That's
out of the
wonderful.
darkness, you know?
All right, let's see. So still no questions. I think I'll go ahead and ask another question then to Velena. Velena, I'm going to share a picture that I'd like you to talk a little bit about that we didn't get a chance to share.
Yes. Guess you can hear me. This was taken at a protest at Point Conception when there was a plan, this was probably in the 80s, a plan to build a liquid natural gas site just off the coast. And one of the complaints about the native population, or by the native population, was that this was a very rugged coastline. And any such plant would not stand up to the waves in the ocean in that area. So there was at that time an encampment at the Hollister Ranch, which was adjacent to the liquid natural gas proposed site. And my son and I, who I think was about 8 at the time, joined Native American people from that region to protest that site. And this was one construction that an artist had established as a marker. And I'm not sure whether it was simply to state that we were here.
Thank you, Velena. I appreciate that. All right, so we have a question from Cheyenne Grandi, and she says, I'm curious about differences in storytelling styles between regions and tribes. Is there anyone that would want to comment on that? Maybe Dennis, do you have any comment on that, or Kat?
Yes. You know, it's because we come from a little bit different environments. The subject matter is a little bit different, but a lot of the lessons are the same. They just refer to different areas, different ways that we relate to them, and things like that. And a lot of the stories now, I'm happy to say, are becoming contemporary stories and how they relate to our traditions. Sometimes we battle ourselves as far as, should we tell this story this way? Should we tell the story that way? And relate it, sometimes it may be conflict, the story that we're saying, that how we relate it to our modern day times and to our traditional times, how we intertwine those things. So other than, like I say, area where the things are a little bit different, the culture's a little bit different, there's a lot of stories that are the same.
A lot of stories are, number one, how things came to be, but number two, on how should we behave or not behave. And those stories in particular are ones that are carrying on to our current situation. And a lot of them rely on how we relate to the earth. And whether it's a desert people or a Florida Seminole people or a Northwest Coast people, the ways of behaving are very similar, and with people who are connected to the earth.
Wonderful. Did you have anything you wanted to speak to on that, Valena?
No, I don't.
No.
I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. Just wanted to check and make sure. So, well, this has been really wonderful. I don't see any other questions. I don't know if there's any of the images that we haven't shared. Valena, if there's any of the other images you'd like to talk about. I know that there was one that was like, I think another protest one. Do you want to go back to Valena's images for a second?
Okay, let me, I'm gonna spotlight Valena and then share.
Okay, give us just one sec.
Certainly.
There's a couple other ones we weren't able to share from Valena's that she had sent in. Not that one. Go down, right there. Yeah, share that.
There have been, from time to time, protests. And I think this was along Wilshire, perhaps at the time of the marathon running, but there were hundreds of people lined up to take the position that the indigenous population is still here. We are not a lost people. We're not historic people gone by the wayside. And so this was, for me, the poster was very powerful, and I felt that I had to take a picture of this one. I think this was a couple of years ago, yeah, on Wilshire. One of the fascinations that I've had in my photography is the view from the back of people, and how we so often look at people's faces, but we don't see the imagery that is behind them. Sometimes it's as colorful as the front. Sometimes it is a puzzlement with nuns wearing backpacks, for example, or the t-shirts that people might have that have writing on the back. So I was fascinated by this particular image. I think it was in Bakersfield at a Choctaw powwow, at the color combinations that this gentleman was using in the arena. There is one thing that I would like to share, a series of books if people want to do more research. This book, I don't know if you, I have to hold it up higher. I think it's reversed.
No, it's fine. We can see it. Yeah, you're
Okay.
good.
It's called Black Indians and Hidden Heritage. And this was probably one of the books that first started the interest and the sharing of information by William Katz. This should still be available in the library. The second book is Black Looks by Bell Hooks, who just recently died. And she is a highly esteemed professor and writer, or was at that time. And so I just wanted to let people know that there are books in the library that they can access to get more information about the coming together of African Native American peoples. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. So we had a request for Native Storytelling Association. So we'll see if we can get that. We are going to be putting all of this up onto YouTube. Okay, looks like we put it into the chat, but we will put it into the notes on YouTube afterwards. So if you don't get a chance to write it down from today, you can go ahead and get it from there. And it looks like Phil says, thanks for having this. I'm Seminole Maroon. So I'm not sure if I said that right. And if I didn't, please forgive me.
No, it's
so
yeah.
Wonderful. Well, this has just been such a wonderful time. Gail Werner says, that was awesome. Thank you all for sharing your art and your stories. I'd have to agree. I think the storytelling, it's something that my grandmother did and my mom did. And, you know, telling the stories of her history and the things that she's gone through were such a big part of my childhood and such a big part of sort of the history in our lives. And so it's just so lovely to hear your stories and to see the way that you guys see the world. Federica Campanieri says, wonderful presentation. Thank you. Shannon Speed of Chickasaw says, thanks for this great event. So we're getting lots of positive comments. And yeah, we're so grateful to each of you artists for being part of this panel discussion. It's something, this kind of thing is something that you wish we could all be together around a fire with like a cup of hot chocolate or something like that and sharing with one another. So hopefully everyone who's come to this you guys can join us hopefully for the opening we're going to have January 22nd, which will feature a lot of the artwork from the different things that we've had. So really appreciate it. Anything you want to say in closing, Kat?
I wanted to thank you, Greenlee Art Space, Kimberly and David, and thank Alliance for California Traditional Arts for helping bring this to all of you. So keep tuned in. Check us out on YouTube.
Yeah, check us out on YouTube, and we will have one more panel coming up on basketry. That'll be in February of next year, as well as our exhibit opening January 22nd. It's Native American art, traditional, contemporary, and beyond. So I love how we're exploring all these different ways of storytelling. So thank you so much to Velena and Dennis and to Camilla and Kat. We are very honored to have you here with us. And yeah, thank you so much. I guess we can.
Happy winter solstice and looking forward to a happy new year.
Yes.
For bringing awareness to everyone, native and non-native alike. You know, it's so good to see that we're making people aware that we're still here. We're still out there telling our stories, singing our songs, telling stories, whether they relate to the traditional or the contemporary, or as Camilla, to the horror. So some of the things that we believe in are a little bit scary sometimes when we go back and look at our traditions and see what is, you know, what our stories tell us and what our traditions tell us. So thank you very much for letting us do that.
You will.
Wonderful.
Good.
Yep. All right. I guess we'll sign off for now.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
for
so
participating.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Happy holidays.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much.